for the African American Mentoring Program. Asia is the African American Mentoring Program GA, and she wrote a student success fee to make this opportunity possible. So APPLI is the AAMP Professional Program Learning Institute. And what we do here is provide information about how to conduct research, how to submit conference proposals, and then we provide funding if you want to present at a conference, attend a conference, or even have a membership in a professional organization for a year. So we're promoting that, and we want to help you if you want to be able to go to a conference or present at a conference. I just wanted Asia to say hello, wave if you can. Oh, she has the camera off, but again, want to recognize her for writing such a strong proposal and making this possible. I also want to introduce my support system here from our AMP committee, Kiara Pratt-Perry. If you could just wave, she's helping out today. And then we also have Aaliyah Chambers, who is from the Black Resource Center. She's the assistant director there. So let's get right into it. I want to first give a recap of what we shared last week, and then I'll introduce our guest speaker, Dr. Nellie Tran. So last week, we talked about what research is. So we talked about its formalized curiosity, it's kind of poking and probing with a purpose. And that definition was provided by, if you see this quote here, by Zora Neale Hurston. And we talked about how we use research to not only develop curiosity, but to also think about how can we conduct research in a way that honors who we are, especially as Black people. And we want to do that in a way that doesn't tarnish our community and doesn't bring up some of that mistrust and distrust from the past, especially when we think about the Tuskegee study. So we talked about that a little bit last week. And we talked about the major question about what are you curious about? So I remember you all sharing some of the things that you're curious about. And now we're going to talk about, well, now that you're curious about it, how do you answer that question that you're curious about? And how do you conduct research methodology? And I can't think of anybody better to share that work with you than Dr. Nellie Tran. I will say this, I don't have her formal bio, but I know her personally. We run together in our department, and I will tell you that, and I call her a sister because she's got sister tendencies, I told her. But when I think about research and methodology and the trueness and the realness of that work, Dr. Nellie Tran comes to mind. So she's going to give you the business about research methodology, but she also will give you the business as it relates to who we are and collecting research in communities of color. So I haven't done her the justice that she deserves as far as her background and her research and who she is in our community, but I want to welcome her to this space and give her an opportunity to share her knowledge with you. So please welcome Dr. Nellie Tran.
Thank you. I think those were all compliments. Thank you, Dr. Green. I'm excited to be with y'all. I love talking about research, and I think my style of research will share with you a little bit about who I am and where I come from. So I'm happy to share more about who I am and about my work and my perspective on this, which, you know, if you've taken research methods before, you probably had it in a very different style than I'm likely to present today. So ask me stuff. I feel like one thing that you should know about me is that I will talk about almost anything that you ask me, and I will tell you the truth about it. But you have to be willing to take the risk to ask me. So otherwise, I'm an open book. So anything you need to know about me before we get started to help you to trust the route that I'm going to take you on? Nah, we good? Okay.
We're good. Thank you. If you all want, you know, this is a safe place. So if you have an opportunity and you're in a space, please feel free to turn on your cameras if you feel comfortable doing so.
Yeah, it totally helps me to see your facial reactions. You know, when we're live, it's like I can shift course real quickly if I see a lot of confusion or give more explanation. So yeah, happy to do that. Let's see. So can I share screen, or is that? Yes, okay. Where is the presentation?
Hi, Avery. Good to see you again.
Okay. Let's see if it'll do this correctly. Can you see my PowerPoint?
We see all your business. We see your calendar.
No.
We see all of that.
That's not what I want. Hold on, hold on. I feel like I'm not this old. I should know how to do this. Okay, here we go. I think this is correct.
There we
Is this
go.
right?
Yes,
Okay.
beautiful. I see it.
Okay, here we go. Here we go. All right, let's get this into, there we go. Whoops. Present there. Come on. Okay. So I call this presentation my research as resistance, because I feel like this is why I do research. I do research because it's my way of resisting the oppressions that I feel like I've experienced and discovered in my life. Why did this go away? And my computer's not cooperating. Could you please cooperate? Okay. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about my journey in research, and as a way of, by way of doing that, I hope that you'll see kind of my perspective on research methods. So Dr. Green asked me to talk to you about kind of different research methodologies. I'm going to go over them broadly and give you kind of my version of it. But I really wanted to spotlight, you know, for me, doing research is about how to bring our communities together and how to make it our own. And a lot of research has to do with, I like this African proverb: until the lion learns how to write, every story will glorify the hunter. And I feel that deeply, that, you know, our communities can't be seen correctly, properly as we are in our glory until we know how to write the stories. And research is the way that knowledge is created, that is recognized around the world. And certainly there are other ways to create stories, but this is one way that I've decided to share my people's story and our communities. This is who I am. So I'm going to talk to you about what I call me search. So the me in me search is that I am the daughter of Vietnamese refugee boat people. My parents left their communist country on a fishing boat. We spent time in refugee camps, and then they came to the US, and I was born 2 months after my parents got to San Diego. I didn't get into college from high school. I went to community college by way of Mesa and Miramar College. And then I went on to get transferred to UCLA, and then I ended up getting a PhD in community and prevention psychology out in Chicago. My research broadly focuses on subtle forms of discrimination in education and counseling. So, you know, kind of big racism stuff, I think, is almost too easy. I feel like, so my heart and my soul works on kind of the subtle things. So it's kind of like, you know, if someone calls me a derogatory term, it's easy for me to say, well, you're racist and that's racist, and let it go. But when it's subtler, when it's something that I can't pinpoint, that stuff lingers, and that stuff makes me feel like, well, am I wrong, or am I a bad person? And so that's the kind of stuff that I'm really interested in, is how systems, education, you know, makes us feel like bad people, and how it continues to oppress us, and isn't clear that it's racist. My teaching philosophy is anti-oppression, liberation psychology, or critical pedagogy. And so that maybe helps to give you a sense of who I am. If there are other...
Sorry to interrupt. We see it as a presentation, as your presenter's view. So we can see you, and is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Wait, you're seeing my presenter's view? You're not seeing
Yeah,
my,
yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
goodness
That's
gracious.
actually, sorry. I hate to interrupt, but I don't want
No.
to spoil surprises that you have in the next slides.
I'm like, why is it being this way? Okay. Does that help to change it?
Yes, perfect.
Ah, okay. There we go. Okay. Technology. We can't all be experts in everything, right? So if you have other questions as we move along, I really encourage you and invite you to ask me more questions, especially if you feel like what I'm saying doesn't jive with who you are or where you come from. Make me work. I'm down for it. So, okay, so where does this all start from? I feel like, part of this is understanding who I am. And I feel like what I'm trying to get across to you is it's easier to understand what my perspective and what my work is in if you know who I am and where I come from. And I want you to bring that with you as you read research and as you become researchers, that oftentimes we can only believe what we see at the end if we know the process it went through and who the people are who are making the judgment calls along the way. Right. So for me, when I started out, this is the first psychology professor, Matt Lieberman. He was the first professor I had at UCLA, and he was a good professor, but it was very clear to me from the get-go that that the stuff he was talking about was really cool, but it didn't apply to people like me. Right? Like when he was talking about how to like influence others, I was just like, nah, I'd have to like go talk to my family first. And there was nothing about like the influence of community and family. And so I knew from the get-go that like psychology wasn't necessarily being inclusive of experiences like mine. And I feel like that has been the driving force for me about why I need to be in control of research. Because the people who are doing the research don't have my experiences, they don't look like me. And so when they ask questions about my community, they ask them as though my people are strangers and are other, right? Like they're like this special unique dinosaur over there, and we're going to ask special questions about them. And I knew that I needed to be in control of how those questions were asked. So right now, it's the interesting thing is that psychology and a lot of research comes from this very like black and white dynamic, but still it's dominated by white folks who are asking all of the questions. And so even the way that they ask questions, which we'll go through, is more representative of how they think about other groups, right? So they're asking questions from their own perspective, and it's hard because we want to believe that research is objective or that who you are doesn't influence what you do, but that's just not true, right? Who you are and where you come from absolutely affects how you ask the question and how you interpret the findings. I'm going to show you some examples of that. But for me, I knew that what I saw didn't include me, so I had this like overarching goal that I was going to create some knowledge that would include my people, that would include perspectives that look like mine, and I wanted to complicate what we know about human nature by including a broader variety of people. So part of my research as me search was not only was I going to explore who I am, because I wasn't learning enough about myself, but I was also going to, along this journey, overcome some of my internalized depression. Right? I love this image of this little boy touching Barack Obama's hair, because for me, it was like I didn't even know what I had been missing until I saw it. And there's something about this image that I've always looked at that I'm like, I didn't even know to think about how psychology, how research, how other things were missing my perspective until it was right in front of me. And so a lot of, I think, us doing research and work is trying to uncover what we've been missing, right? And all the ways that we don't even desire to be included because we don't even know to expect that we could be included or that the work could reflect our people and our experiences much more. So as Dr. Green has said, research is formalized curiosity, right? It's poking and prying with a purpose. But a lot of times we've been taught that we're not allowed to do that with our own personal experiences or experiences that are personal to us. And that's just not true, right? Because white folks get to do that all the time. People in positions of power, they get to do it with their own experiences. They get to do it with other people's experiences. But when we do it, we're told that that's too subjective, right? They use words like that to make us feel bad about our insight about ourselves, which to me is really awful because the social sciences and psychology is about understanding human nature. So when you're saying that my curiosity about my human nature is not science, does that mean that I'm not human? Right? Like, does that mean that my experiences don't need to be understood and don't need to exist within our human understanding? And that's all that I can think about. So I feel like one of the biggest things we have to resist is that feeling that when I'm doing research about things that are personal, it's somehow not science, right? Science is just about methodology, right? It's about how you ask your question and how you collect information. It is not about where the question came from. And in fact, I want to show you some stuff that shows how biased and whitewashed and racist a lot of the questions have been that have been asked about from outsiders of our communities. Right. So I'm interested. I started off my world being interested in refugee research. So here, these are Vietnamese refugees. Those are my parents. Those are some of the only image photos. I don't know where it came up. I like found them somewhere, but that's my mom and dad before they came to the US, and like some of the only childhood photos that we have of them. And I was really interested in how these experiences affected who I am today. Right. But the only thing that I could find about Vietnamese people at the time was things about the Vietnam War, right? And even when I went to Vietnam, I was like, going to places that I wanted to learn about the war, and they don't call it the Vietnam War because obviously they are Vietnam, right? That would be every war that was there. They call it the American War. And there was something about the way that I was like, what? It's called the American War. And like it both made so much sense, right? Like that's when America came and caused chaos in the country. But it was also that I had never learned about what it was like for the Vietnamese people. I only know about the war from the American perspective, from the US perspective, and therefore from the very white perspective. And I never learned about how they colonized my people or how they caused all this harm. And it, the more I went through psychology and tried to learn about and ask questions, no one had taught me how to ask questions about this pain, that the history of my people and how it impacts who I am today. So everything that I was learning about how I was supposed to be didn't include traumas that I had experienced and traumas that my family had that I had inherited from my family, right? And so it always talked about how the thing that I did right now, right? Like if I'm feeling imposter syndrome or if I'm feeling like I need to overwork in order to get good grades or get paid, that must be because I'm a perfectionist, or that I need to see that I have to work really hard in order to be accepted. But no one ever talked about the possibility that maybe I work that hard, not yes, because of racism and because of all these things that make it so that I have to be exceptional, but in my blood is also like, they call it resilience, but I call it survival, right? Like it's nice to be resilient, but like I'm tired, I don't want to be resilient all the time. Like it's cool to have this strength-based approach, but it also isn't real, right? Like my people have had to survive something. And yes, there's a positive aspect to it. And also, why did we have to survive? And why do I have to keep surviving? How come other people don't have to survive? And what's the impact on me to have to be resilient and survive all the damn time? Right. And so like those became the questions I wanted to ask. Is that like, yay, Vietnamese people are so like, so resilient. Look at all they've been through. And look how, how they've risen, right? That's like whole pull yourself by the bootstrap stuff. But then I was like, this is me as a kid. And I love this picture of me as a baby in this bathtub, because if you look around the bathtub, it always dawns on me like how poor we were, right? And like this is in what was North Park back then before it became so expensive to live in. And I feel like, I ended up getting a PhD, but like people who look at me now, they don't see this. They don't know that my people existed when, in low income communities, or how hard it has been on us and how much we had to survive back then. And I felt like, so people who were studying Asian Americans were only asking like, oh, they're so great in school, they do so well. How come they do so well? And I feel like, well, that doesn't include me. I didn't do well in school. I actually failed the second grade. I was held back in second grade. I didn't get into college. So I'm like, who are they talking about? That's not me, right? I thought I was considered Asian American too. And it turns out, as I started like thinking about this more, I started realizing like, it's because of who's asking the question. There's, I'll have it, it's on here. There's this video that Canon, the camera company, made, and they have this guy, and they have him posing. They gave the guy a different backstory, and they had photographers take pictures of him. And so each of these images represented a different story. And you can tell when you watch the little video, it shows how, like, depending on the backstory, they took his picture a different way. Right. So like when they thought he was an ex-felon or had a criminal record, they took his picture in a really like hard way. Right. And then when they thought he was a millionaire, they took his picture in yet another way. And it just, for me, it really like pinpointed the person holding the camera has so much power. There's so much power to how they represent you and how the world is going to see you. Right. And so I feel like it's the story. And in our world, we call that the theory, right? So people will say like, well, what theory are you using? And and we don't talk about the importance of that. And then we don't talk about, well, who came up with the theory, right? So in all of your classes, I feel like this is the thing I've been telling everyone to do. But if you look up the people who came up with all your theories, the majority of the theories that I know come out of counseling are all written by white folks. There's no evidence behind them at all. And like, it's a huge blow, right? And like, the same is true with a lot of theories across the social sciences. And we're only starting to uncover this. So in a lot of ways, they tell us to like memorize these theories or these paradigms, but they're not telling us that they come from a particular perspective. We got to always ask, whose perspective are we using then to understand other human behavior, right? And part of doing this is something I call critical reflexivity. And really it's about uncomfortable reflexivity. Like, you will do better work if you know yourself well and you know where your blind spots are, right? So I know, for example, that as an Asian American identified person, I only know my experiences, right? And so I have to constantly be asking, in what ways, like, for example, in today's world, in what ways have I been given some anti-Black racist beliefs, right? And so every time I come across it, I have to do the uncomfortable thing of asking myself to reflect and go, well, is that really my belief, or was that given to me, right? And the same is true when we do research, because a lot of times some of us come into power and we start asking questions about our people in the format that we've been given, right? So, but we start doing the same thing to our people, right? We start asking the questions in the same format as white folks and powerful people who've come before us. I'm sorry, not powerful. People in power who hold a lot of power have come before us, because we're trying so hard to fit into the mold, right? That we have this like imposter syndrome stuff that's telling us, well, this is how researchers talk. This is what researchers do, right? We end up prioritizing different methodologies because I want to be a good researcher. I want this to look good on my resume or whatever. And instead we end up then throwing our own communities under the bus. And we end up actually letting go of the thing that makes us special, which is our unique perspective on the world and on communities and human behavior. So digging deep into who you are will help you then to figure out, what are the stories that need to be told? What is the information that needs to go out there? And what have I not learned yet? What do I need to get out, right? This is called your social position, right? Where you are in the world, who you are in the world, influences where you position yourself and how you understand everything. So it could be about, all the demographic information you hold, your race, your ethnicity, your immigration status, your age, your, what type of community you grew up in. Growing up in San Diego is very different than growing up in Washington, D.C. And that influences the way that you perceive yourself, other people who look like you. And you have to really be able to delve in and be real with yourself about what are some of the positive aspects of your social location, but also what are some of the potential challenges, right? I know one of my potential challenges as the daughter of Vietnamese refugees is I have a hard time with folks who immigrate here under less traumatic situations, right? And are lumped in the same Asian American category as me. And I know that about myself. So when I'm asking questions about broader Asian Americans, I can attend to some of the biases that I know I bring into it, right? And some of the biases we hold aren't really ours, but were given to us because we live in a racist society, and it's always around us. So how do we do this? We listen for hidden voices and we search for them. You're constantly needing to push to the boundaries of who you don't understand. So if you're constantly looking for who is the voice that we're missing, then that will help you to identify whose perspectives you need to include, right? So purposeful consideration of perspectives that are not readily considered or included. So trying your best to broaden your own horizons by looking at, well, okay, so if you wanted to study a group of Black women, that's great. But within that category, who might we be missing, right? And like at San Diego State, you might consider, well, there are Black women who are involved in different programs, but there are probably Black folks who aren't involved in the programs who would be great to include in the study. And so you want to constantly be kind of pushing yourself to think about the way that we're doing the study is probably intentionally excluding someone who needs to be in the study. So who might that be? And if you can't come up with someone, you have to ask somebody else, because that means you have a blind spot. And if you want to do good work that represents our communities, you have to own where your biases are. You have to own where your hidden blind spots are. And you got to like work in communities of people who are going to share those blind spots with you and not shame you for it, right? None of us are perfect and we can't expect to be. Then it comes to asking the questions. So if you know who you're studying and what experiences you're interested in, you got to be able to figure out, well, what kind of questions am I asking and how am I asking it, right? There's a difference between, like, if you're interested in success at school, you could ask it like, why are students failing, right? Why are students succeeding? Those are just half of the equation of where people can perform. So if you ask a particular question a certain way, you will get information that is for for the question you ask. So if you ask about students failing, you will learn about how students fail. You will not learn about how students succeed. And if you ask the question the other way about how students are succeeding, you're not going to learn about how people are failing, right? So to be intentional about how do you actually want to represent the community and how do you actually want to learn about it? It's very different than if you just broadly ask, how are students doing? Right? Because maybe, especially during pandemic time, maybe students don't even care about succeeding or failing. Maybe there's something completely different that is so much more important. Maybe they're just like, you know what, I just need to survive. And survival right now has nothing to do with academic success. But the first two questions oftentimes rely on numbers, right? And like we're often then having to identify what the outcome of interest is. And as the person who is the researcher, you are in control of that, which means you have to make it up. And this is true of all the research that has come before us, right? So people think that there's what we call value-free science, and that's just fake, right? Like that's not true. All science, all work has values attached to it. People who talk about it being objective or as though there is no values in it are lying and are hiding something or are totally unaware of where biases are, and I wouldn't trust that research, right? Because here are 3 examples of value-free objective research that has messed with us and have long-lasting negative impact, right? The eugenics movement was considered a scientific movement that was not about values, right? And we all know how that came out. No good for our communities, right? Female hysteria was also considered to be value-free. It was just like, oh, it just is. Women are hysterical. And then, for a long time, we even had homosexuality as a disease in our manuals and books. And all of these things came from a perspective that devalued people of color, women, and folks who identify as queer. And so they all came from a value system. They wouldn't have even asked the question had they not held certain values that denigrated people to begin with, right? So here's the question that you all are going to have to embark on as you begin to figure out what research you're going to do. One, what are your values, right? And how do your values attach to the way that you're going to do your work and the process that you're going to undertake? There are 2 major types of work that you first have to figure out if you're going to do qualitative work or quantitative work. Simply put, qualitative work describes stuff. So I have pictures of books here. If you wanted to know the qualities of these books, you might say, oh, these are books that have to do with people of color, and they tend to be more social justice oriented, right? Like I'm describing the qualities of these books. Or you could be interested in in quantitative methods, which is all about numbers, right? It could be variables that vary in quantity. So there are 4 books here. How many books do you have, right? Magnitude, duration, how long does it take you to read each book, right? And they're not as interesting, but we have to be careful about why we're doing quantitative methods, because there's a lot of like pomp and circumstance behind doing numbers work, right? There's a lot of people either have fear of number or they prop it up on a pedestal and say it's the best thing ever. And so we want to be careful that we're picking a method that actually matches our value system and matches the questions that we're most interested in. Then you want to think about, okay, fine, what's my research philosophy, right? What do I actually believe research ought to do? So I want you to think about whose voice or experience do you want to share? So really identifying whose experience should be at the center of all of this, right? Who do you believe should share that voice, right? Should it be me, or should it be Dr. Green, or should it be you, right? Like there's needs to be intentionality around who it is that you want to include in the study, and also who gets to be the person who amplifies those people. Who gets to decide what the story will be? And that primarily means, are you the researcher, the person who should be telling the story, or should the person who is in the study, should they be the ones who are allowed to tell the story? Because that will dictate what type of methodology you use as well. And who are you in relation to the people in the study, right? If you don't ask those questions, and if you don't ask those questions of the papers that you're reading, then oftentimes you're going to be prioritizing the voice that you see on the paper, right? And oftentimes those people don't belong to the communities that they are trying to amplify voices for, because they believe in empowerment, right? This big fancy word, and everyone's all about, let's empower people to share their voice. I'm gonna use the power I've been given to amplify other people's voices. And that's nice, but why don't they have power? And why does it require my power to, to amplify? You have to ask these questions. And then you have to strategically take the power that you have as a researcher and put it somewhere, right? Here's an example. So here's a study that I did in Chicago. And in a quantitative way, we were looking at teachers. So I could say, for example, 5 out of 6 teachers think low-income kids don't do well in school. Okay, that's information, 5 out of 6, but what do I do about it? All I know is that teachers think this, 5 out of 6, but are they good teachers? Are they bad teachers? Do they have good intentions? Do they know why? None of that matters, right? Because I, as a researcher, dictated, I wanted to know how many of them believe in this statement. So that's all I know. On the other hand, if I ask teachers to talk about their experience working with the kids and I leave it more open-ended, then I actually hear what they have to say. So this is a real quote from a teacher at the same school. Sometimes when a kid is having a bad day in school, I think, well, what happened in their house today? Like today was a really wild day, and I started thinking, is it like the end of the month and all the bills are due? I think that so much goes on in the houses and we just don't know. Everybody has bad days. So suggesting that this teacher was one of the 5 teachers that know that believes the statement that low-income kids don't do well in school, but she has a reason for it, right? And that ends up being much more interesting and much more powerful. I actually know something I can do from this statement. The thing is, quantitative research that uses measurement tools are asking you as a researcher to pick the tool. So you have to know what is best, but then you have to treat everyone in the study exactly the same. And I really love this comic strip that explains that, right? For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. And in some ways, that's what we're asking people to do. If I pick a tool like an exam, right? If I take a multiple choice exam and say, everyone here take a multiple choice exam, I'm gonna, this exam will tell me how well you know about astronomy, right? Yeah, but some people can't read English as well. Some people have test anxiety. Some people have parents who have PhDs, all of those things impact how they take a multiple choice exam. It doesn't really tell us that much information. But if I'm going to only look at test scores or numbers, I have to treat every single person the same. It doesn't take into consideration any of those other underlying factors. It's valuable because it gives me an easy way to assess large groups of people. On the other hand, you might believe that this is a photo from the disability rights movement, where the line that comes from it is nothing about us without us, right? And to me, this is when we often do qualitative work, then we're talking about incorporating voices into our research. And so not only are we taking, we're not just taking people's voices and experiences and turning them into numbers, now we're letting them hold on to the voice in words. And then you have to really think about, okay, so if I'm going to do my research in a socially just way, then I need to do it with people, right? If I can't just do it for people. How do I then do things with people in mind and incorporate their voices as well, right? Am I making sense so far?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let me then move on. Here is a real live example. This is a set of studies about teacher expectations and student performance. And this was a line of research that I was really engaged in. I'm going to show you a bunch of studies and done in different perspectives and over time. Each of these findings is a separate study. And so they're all quantitative studies. And I want to show you how quantitative studies are really important and cool, but you can only find out one thing at a time, and you have to be very clear about it, and it has to be driven by the researcher, right? So this is the theories part. So what we know about, if you've heard of words like Pygmalion Effect or ability formation theory, one single study can tell us that when teachers hold high expectations of kids, that we similarly get higher performance from students. So if I expect students to do better on a test, then they will do better, perform better on the test, right? And what happens in between, we're not quite sure. People speculate that it's because if I think that a student will do well, I treat the student as though they're going to do well, and then they do well, right? And so that's one study. And then if, for example, the students hold lower expectations, then the same will be true. Students will have lower expectations. Study 2, right? That's all we know. We don't know why. And so then these researchers started thinking, well, what about if the teacher's not involved at all? Can students still be impacted by the way they think about their teachers' expectations of them? And then it turns out this is called self-fulfilling prophecy, or sometimes we talk about it with race around stereotype threat and learned helplessness. But if a student thinks that the teachers expect more of them, they'll also do well, right? And this is where it becomes really dangerous, because the reverse of that is also true. So then they did another study. Turns out if students think that teachers expect less of them, then they do worse. Can you imagine then what this does for students of color, especially Black students, right? If you think that your teacher thinks less of you, then you underperform where you should be, right? But this was really cool. When I learned about this stuff, I was like, this is cool. I got to do more about this because teachers have so much power over students, right? So this is me again, because I went back to my me search, right? Because I was like, this is so cool, but where am I in this? Because when I was a kid as a refugee, this is me at Christmas. So it turns out when you come to America and you have to learn about US culture, nobody tells refugee parents that Christmas is a thing where you're supposed to play Santa and give white Santa all the credit for all your hard-earned presents. So my parents didn't know this, which means they didn't buy me presents. And we would have a tree because we saw that that's what people do, but my parents would wrap empty boxes because just for the look. And so we'd go to parties and people would have to give me fake presents so I could take the picture. And so I was just like, well, and then I'd go to school and the teachers would be like, well, how many presents did you get? And I would have to make up an answer. And so so when I was reading all this expectation stuff, I was like, well, they don't just expect you to, do well in school. They also expect you to celebrate American holidays, and they expect you to like have Santa in your house, and you have to come back with presents. I showed this picture to my teacher one day. This is my cousins and I. We were having a barbecue, but we didn't have a barbecue. And so we put some cement blocks together, and then we put we made a fire and we put a little grill sheet on top of it, and that was how we made burgers. Apparently that's not safe. And so my teachers reported that shit. So I didn't know that you weren't supposed to tell people about this kind of stuff. I thought that this is how things got done. So it turns out they held expectations of my family life as well. So it wasn't just about school. So when I started working with kids in school, I was working with refugees. These are refugees from Somalia that I was working with. And I noticed the exact same thing was still happening to them, that they were not just being expected to be good in school and learn English, but there was these social expectations of them and expectations that they do things in a particular way. This is a quote from one of the interviews that I collected from a teacher. This is the only group that's come that doesn't even know how to write their name. Writing on a line is new to them, printing, knowing in which direction letters go. Their culture is more different from our culture, more so than Mexican culture, for example. Other groups, when they come, they have some English, the Bosnians, Romanians, they are taught it in their country, but these kids have no English. If language is more similar, like Spanish and English, it's easier. They at least know the alphabet, but not these kids. They're confused by what a 3-year-old would be confused by, like the B and D letters. They don't know how to turn them. Spanish-speaking children know the alphabet. And this, like when she said this, I was just like, wait, what? They're supposed to know stuff before coming to kindergarten? I thought that was the whole point of kindergarten. Now, I failed the second grade because I couldn't read yet. And so this really like impacted how I was thinking about our community, because I was like, dang, I was really far behind then, right? But she held expectations of what kids were supposed to be like before they even arrived to her. And so she already had this deficit mindset when she worked with the kids, which made me realize the researchers who had done all of this research had controlled it and had basically said it's all about academic progress. And so I said, you know what? No, I got to document how biased teachers are and how much they expect of students. And that when they expect all these different things, that's when they're like, well, they don't meet these other expectations. So how are they going to meet my academic performance expectations? And so interview teachers, and this is, there's a link to the article if you want to read it. But basically, I uncovered that teachers expect kids to know all kinds of stuff, right? And I basically used our scientific methods to uncover the fact that teachers not only wanted these kids to become quote unquote American, they wanted them to actually become second-class citizens. They wanted them to assimilate to being less than in the US, right? So they were like, it was all contingent. They weren't going to even expect high expectations of their performance, because they're like, they're never going to achieve the academic dream, because one of the teachers was like, because they don't know where water goes when you flush the toilet. I was just like, what? Nobody knows that. Nobody wants to know that. But they had created these like really, really racist expectations that impacted then how they thought about their academic performance. So when you back up all that way and realize how oppressive school is for kids, then it's like, well, of course kids think that teachers have low expectations of them, right? So back to you all. All of this is to say then that your research strategy will depend on your overall goal of your research and your questions and hypotheses. You really got to start with what is the whole point of this? If you don't know what the point is for doing your research to begin with, it's gonna be really easy to go back to like, oh, but I don't know how to do good research, right? Screw good research. What would that look like for our communities to begin with, right? What does good information look like? What are good findings for our community, right? And you get to decide, do you want to describe people or like types of behavior or phenomenon? Do you want to know about relationships between different variables? And do you want to know what causes people to be that way, right? Realizing that the latter two require you to be the expert, right? And if you are the expert, then you're going to be the voice over your participants. And so if you do that, which is fine, it's the researcher's responsibility to realize what they're doing, right? And you can do that, but you're going to be doing it for your participants. If you decide you want to be more descriptive and inclusive, then you're going to lean more towards qualitative methodologies that will incorporate actual voices rather than it all coming from you. One of the things I always think about too is in my early research days, I always felt like hesitant to be the voice of my people. And so if that's something that you're worried about, then using qualitative methodologies also means that you get to maintain your place as being with your community. And so then when you're writing it up or presenting it, I highly encourage you to use language like we. And I know that you've been trained all the years to take out the I's and we's and first person writing. But when I talk about research about my community, I make it clear that I did it with my community, right? So we are this way. These are my experiences too. And so just remember then, if you do it that way, and if you are doing what I said about hidden voices and you're searching for those missing voices within your population of interest, then you'll get closer to understanding the whole. This is from a parable from India, where any one person only has part of the picture. And so our job then is to uncover all the different perspectives that might exist so that we can get a fuller picture of the whole, right? Okay, that was a lot and that was fast, but I think that gives us a starting point to talk about it. And really, I think the thing is to not be like so bothered about good science without first knowing what it is, what the whole purpose of good science is, right? I think there's a trap in it for us who wants to do right by our communities when we start getting trapped in like but I want to be a good researcher. Is this good? You know, am I good enough? Am I smart enough to do this? And it's like, no. Would your people be proud of you for sharing this, right? And I feel like to me, that has been my driving force is like, I don't want to let down the people I came here to do the work for. And so if someone's going to say I'm a bad researcher, well, I'm going to take that risk to be a bad researcher, to do right by my people. And I feel like that's the right direction that we want to work in, because so many of us who have been quote unquote successful in school have actually been trained to think of it in the opposite way. And our communities are not wrong for how they are and how they have survived and existed, you know? That is my talk. So let's turn it all to you all and hear more about, whoops, sorry, that's a different one. More about what this brings to mind for you and how we can talk about this more with you.
Thank you, Dr. Tran. That was very good information, a good reminder of how to do research and in a way that honors us. So any questions for Dr. Tran as we move forward? We have about 10 more minutes. This is an opportunity to get those questions answered that you've been scared to ask. Maybe your professor or someone that you're doing research with, or just anything that you want to know. Okay, Kimberly.
I have a question. So I'm looking at, and I'm not actually sure how to approach what I'm looking at as well. My background is in special education, and I've been a special education teacher, you know, for forever. But I think I actually had my son listening too, sorry. But, you know, he's you know, young in college. And I think for him and I, he's a millennial and I'm older, of course, but the viewpoints we have are so different about what's included in, you know, the things that are being taught to our students, and we're trying to force our students to learn. It's usually why I have a lot of issues with special education students, because, you know, they're going to ask the questions, how, you know, sometimes when it's appropriate or when it's not appropriate, they don't care. So I love that about, you know, people who don't necessarily know about all the supposedly filters you're supposed to have and not saying certain things. So that's probably one of the most rewarding things about teaching in special education I've found. However, I'm looking at doing research in why there's so much disproportionality in special education. And it's a discussion that is held, and then we identify that it's been there. And so I'm looking back when the Act was implemented, and what have we actually done to really correct that? Because it's there and we know it's there. And what I'm trying to figure out is, my mother did a PhD program where she was a qualitative study where she received a lot of input from Black female administrators. And a lot of I haven't read all through it because that's literally like I have to take a little bit at a time, but what happened was found out a lot of the overt things that occur. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm going on forever, but the overt things that occur when you are in professions of education, I'm just going to say because that was the category. I kind of want to put that together, if that makes sense. How do you do that? How do you, because I do want to get perspectives of administrators and some of their experiences, and especially for African-American administrators, because I feel like there are so many things that we endure in trying to, I don't know, just like some of the things that you said, as far as people being able to value your opinion or respect your ideas. Like, I don't know, how do you get that out there?
Grounded theory is the method I would choose. So grounded theory analysis is all rooted in what people who are in the experience do. And there's, happy to share like a list of resources. If you want to email me, I can give you a name, all the name of the all the books I use. But I feel like you got to come up with a question that lets people talk, right? The story that comes to mind for me is Brown versus Board of Education is great, right? But it also sucks. And like when you want, because what happened is that people said separate isn't equal, right? And so they put everyone together. But in that, they also made an assumption of where the good schools are, right? And so I keep asking the question, but is separate actually unfair? Because what if we want immersion? Like, what if you're interested in Afrocentric education? That ain't happening in the suburbs with white kids. So what if you wanted a school that was all Black? What's wrong with that, right? We just want the Black schools to be good, right? So then if you start with the question of like letting people talk about what they want, stuff like that comes out, right? And then your job as the researcher then is to uncover the subtext of what they're saying. And that is the art form, right? Where if you are truly open to listening to what they say and don't come into it with a preconceived notion of what the answer is, then the story that will emerge for you. And the story might be, we have been asking, but the thing that we have been asking for, they didn't listen to. We didn't say we wanted to go to the white school. We said we wanted a good school, right? And this is still ongoing now, where people are like, I just want my school to be good. How come everyone's talking about diversity? I don't see most people asking for a diverse school who are POCs, right? We're asking for a good school. And why does the good school not happen to be in the places that are naturally diverse, right? So to me, it goes back to like, can we ask the right open question to let people share openly? Because, and can we not use the words that our colonizers have used and that already give us the clue of what the answer they want is, right? So if you ask the question, for example, do you want your child to be in integrated education? Then they're going to know what the answer is. Of course I do. I want my kids to be with all the quote unquote normal kids or whatever, right? But if we didn't use that language and actually spoke to people, like, what do you want for your kids? Broadly, right? What are your hopes and dreams for your kids? I suspect that you'll actually get deeper and more complex storytelling when we let people talk about everything without, dictating the path that they have to go down. And the other thing is, when we use big fancy words like that, we're telling them we need them to be smart and to impress us. And really, I find that most people who use those big complex words, and I tell this to, I've got Jazz here, so I'm like looking at her, but I tell my students all the time, I'm like, why are you using big fancy words in therapy for? Who's that for? It's like, because you have a self-esteem issue, now you're gonna take it out on your clients, right? So it's like, you gotta know yourself, leave that shit at home, and so that you can come in and really allow people to, be free to share what they need to share. So that would be my advice.
I really appreciate that. That was so much good information. Like every word you're saying is on point, and I do appreciate it very much. Please, I definitely want your contact information.
Yes, Dr. Green has it, or I can put it in the chat.
Other questions before I know it's 12:57. So what Dr. Tran has put her information in the chat. So please utilize that as a resource for you as you continue your research journey. I know that as students, sometimes it's difficult to get to this place. Like your teachers might be saying, hey, you got to do this. And you're like, but I really want to do what Dr. Tran said. So, you know, what do you do? So living
Can I
your
answer that question?
Yes. That was my question. So I'm glad. Yes, answer that quickly for us.
Okay, how do you overcome some people who want to colonize your mind at San Diego State? Because that shit's real. One, they know me, so it's not like they don't know if you drop, you know, do a little name dropping, like they don't know what I've been like preaching and like sharing around the university, right? So there's that. Two, get curious, right? And okay, quickly, I have this paper. I'm writing this paper right now on the infiltrator experience, and you'll have to invite me back at another time for me to share the whole theory on it. But really, it's screw this imposter syndrome shit, right? Like, I am not pretending to be something. I know this place wasn't made for me, so I don't need to come in and pretend to be something. I already know you all are not like me. The task is I need to be able to put on a mask and take that shit off at night, right? But so I need to maintain why I came here and what I came here for, but I need to also be smart enough to like pay attention to what the norms and the rules are, because sometimes I just need to get by, right? And there are places where I'm gonna prioritize my wellness and not fight, because like I don't need to fight here. I got bigger battles to fight somewhere else, right? So in those spaces, then I know, okay, I'm not gonna fight about that, but here's a place I am gonna fight. And when you need to kind of bring people on your side so that you can do what you want, you need to put them on your team. And interestingly, it's not that hard to get people to be on your team. And especially in this day and age, very simple thing that you can say is, I know you're into, I know you're on the side of diversity. And so I know you understand the value of prioritizing participant voices right now. So you just give them credit for it. Like, we can do that, right? Because we have to do that shit all the time. As long as it came from you, at least you know the truth of it, right? So you can say like, well, as diversity-minded people or equity-minded people, I'm so glad that you also believe in prioritizing Black voices. Right. Another thing that you will see people do is they'll say like, well, isn't this an experience that's true for all people, not just for Black women? Right. If they say that, then you can say, you know, I wonder if that's true. Why don't we conduct this study and see if it is? Right. It's just the first one. Right. So they don't need to be wrong. Right. But we're so used to what people say to us as being like something that is saying that we're not allowed to do something. Twist their words on them. It's okay. And there's tons of research out there now that will show you why we need to do this kind of work. And especially at San Diego State, there's a lot of people doing this kind of work. And a lot of us have figured out how to get our way. And if you need advisors and stuff, you need to just find the right people to be on your team, right? There are theories that come from perspectives that come from our communities that also make it a lot easier for us to advocate for the work we want to do. So
thank you, Dr. Tran. I wish we had some more time with you. This is exactly why I invited you. I didn't just want to provide, you know, a presentation on details about qualitative and quantitative. I wanted it to be really about how do we as people of color, as Black folks, bring this into our research, and how do we do it in a way that we feel good about what we're doing. And I love the question about, will my people feel proud about what I'm doing? And so that's what it's about. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's good to see you in your form, because I see you wreaking havoc in our department meetings, but it's good to see you in this
I prefer these environments where we're building, because I do feel like I have to lay the smack down in professional spaces way too often, and they only see me as a troublemaker. Real quick, Rochelle, if you need help doing that, I'm sure Dr. Green can help, and also I'm happy to help you identify folks as well on campus.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Reach out to me or Dr. Tran if you have other questions or need more support. I'm dropping my information in the chat too. All right, take care, everybody. Thank you. Dr. Tran, thank you. I appreciate you.
Wait, Hold on, one more
Oh.
time.
Never
Go
Oh,
mind.
ahead.
Asia, what do you
Go,
want to
go.
say?
I wanted to make sure we announce all of our other upcoming events that we
Oh,
have.
I forgot about that. Yes. Nikki Giovanni, Kat Rodriguez. Who else we got? Asia.
Let me back up. So first of all,
Okay.
don't forget that if you are interested in getting professional development, to email us with a conference that
Yes.
you attend so that we can be able to pay for that. So that we can get you to those different resources and conferences. Also, when you're coming to the different speaker series, we will be buying those speakers' books and be giving some of those out to students that attend those. So next week we have Kat Rodriguez, who was the saxophonist for Beyonce for 10 years on tour. She's also the mother of Keon Harold Jr., who was wrongfully accused of stealing a cell phone and attacked in a hotel. She will be Tuesday night on March 9th. The following week, we will have Nikki Giovanni coming. And we have our own Rachel, who's here now, that will be moderating that conversation. And that's going to be a neat event because Nikki's going to actually do some of her poetry, but also we're going to be able to talk about the poetry and how that's applicable to today's time. So the programming that we're doing is all about improving Black student success. So please tell your friends, your family members to come out to this event. These type of presentations have not been done at this level at this university before. And so let's come with the full audience. I mean, it's not very often do you get to sit in the virtual space or a space with Nikki Giovanni and get that knowledge. So please be able to come out and look for any upcoming events. And if you have any suggestions, we do have some funding that Dr. Green and I are talking about for maybe trying to get some another speaker or something. We're not giving any money back to San Diego State University in any kind of capacity. For the emotional draining that they put on me for being a Black woman, we taking all their money and we're gonna do what we do with it. So please come to all the events and fill out our surveys so we know what we can do better. And if there's a suggestion before we close out the end of the semester to bring, I've seen a lot of questions that we did not get answers to, make sure you come back. We can send us some feedback about that because maybe we can throw another session in there about how to select an advisor, who should be on your chair, who should be on your committee, because those are all things we need to know, especially everybody in here is now a woman of color and a Black woman of color too. There's certain people you don't want on your committee because they're not going to enhance you, they're going to enable you, and we're trying to get degrees and to be where the money resides, okay? Okay, that's all.
And a quick shout out to Jazz. If y'all want more of this style of deep internal work and uncovering of oppression, Jazz is getting trained really well and is available. Jazz and Nia are both at the BRC offering counseling services there for free.
Thank you, everyone. See, this is why I got Asia by my side, because she helps me to remember all of this stuff, and then she says it in such beautiful ways. So I dropped everything in the chat. I know that we are over, but again, thank you. Our next meeting is at the end of this month on March 24th, same time, and we'll be talking about conference proposal preparation. So enjoy the rest of your day, everyone, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.